Hey, this is Zach Log the Great, and I am here together here tonight with my friend Nate.
Hey, everybody.
And also we are joined by Hari Seldon.
Good evening.
And we are getting together tonight to talk about Rudyard Kipling's poem, "The Hymn of Breaking Strain." I keep on wanting to put a "the" in there, but there's not one. Before we get to that, I did want to mention a couple of things. If you like my channel, you like my work, you'd like to help support me, you can do that on a monthly basis between $1 and $5 at subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great. Also, I not long ago wrote a short novel, technically novella. If you want to slice hairs, that's fine. And The Mayor of Christ Mountain. It is now available on Amazon on Kindle. And I'm working on getting another print edition done soon. And I will, if you're interested, keep an eye out, and I will keep an eye on here, and I will probably update you when that comes along. Having said all of that, Nate has volunteered to read the poem for us tonight, so I am going to put that up on the screen. And here we go. As soon as you guys see that, let me know, and we will get that move along. Get that part.
There it is.
All right, go for it.
Rudyard Kipling, Hymn of Breaking Strain. Let careful textbooks measure. Let all who build beware. The load, the shock, the pressure, material can bear. So when the buckled girder lets down the grinding span, the blame of loss or murder is laid upon the man, not on the stuff, the man. But in our daily dealing with stone and steel, we find the gods have no such feeling of justice toward mankind. To no set gauge they make us, for no laid course prepare, and presently o'ertake us with loads we cannot bear, too merciless to bear. The prudent textbooks give it in tables at the end, the stress that shears a rivet or makes a tie bar bend. What traffic wrecks macadam, what concrete should endure, but we, poor sons of Adam, have no such literature to warn us or make sure. We hold all earth to plunder, all time and space as well, too wonder stale to wonder at each new miracle, till in the mid-illusion of Godhead neath our hand falls multiple confusion on all we did or planned, the mighty works we planned. We only of creation, O luckier bridge and rail, abide the twin damnation, to fail and know we fail. Yet we, by which sure token, know we once were gods, take shame in being broken, however great the odds, the burden, or the odds. O veiled and secret power, whose paths we seek in vain, be with us in our hour of overthrow and pain, that we, by which sure token, we know thy ways are true, in spite of being broken, because of being broken, may rise and build anew. Stand up and build anew.
Okay, so Hari, would you like to start us off with your first thoughts on this one?
So my first thoughts is that, it's a pretty good poem. It rhymes. It has a regular repeating meter. It has something of a structure to it. This doesn't seem like a terribly high bar, but I've just come off of reading more modern poetry than I would have liked, for reasons I won't get into. So this is a breath of fresh air. But Kipling always is, to be fair. Something I do find interesting is it makes multiple references to what you would assume is a vague sort of polytheistic world. The gods have no such feeling of justice towards mankind. But then the last stanza is very clearly directed at a singular god in particular. I found that
especially
interesting.
especially if you know if you know early modern English pretty well,
Hmm.
which most people don't. But this is I actually did a video on this, a short video on this because it was just interesting to me, because we don't use thee, thou, and thy anymore, and we haven't used them for so long that I still have the screen up. Bloody heck, I do that sometimes.
I mean, at least
There
it's
we go.
this time a picture of like some half-naked gladiator.
With a goofy mustache. Anyway, um, but
Mustaches are
uh,
only creepy if you allow them to be.
the we don't have thee, thou, and thy anymore. But when we did, one of the distinctions was that basically those are singular. Thou was singular, you was plural, and
Hmm.
we lost that. But if you are aware of that, then yes, he is talking in that last stanza about a singular God. Um, and I couldn't like right at the moment point to anything, point to a specific one, but I feel like Kipling does this, talks in those terms, occasionally, of gods, lowercase g, and I don't, I, I don't know. It is an interesting like rhetorical thing, and I don't always, I don't quite know, what to think of it. But there we are.
There was a documentary I listened to, sort of absorbed while I was driving, called The Hidden Kingdom, and some of it I was like, I don't know, but some of it I actually thought was pretty insightful. And one of the things they were talking about is that this notion is that, like, at Babel, the nations were divided up and given into the hand of these lesser spiritual beings, and they were given dominion over the nations for a time. And these are the small g gods that we're talking about. Because, I mean, even in the Bible, you have people referencing, these
Yeah,
creatures as
Moloch
gods.
and Baal and the others.
Yeah. And so, and then, but above them remains, the God of gods, the high God who is, Yahweh. And eventually he's going to come back and strip them of their authority that they were given for a time over sinful earth.
I've heard the comparison that in the same way we use other titles, we refer to Lord, for instance. And Lord has a specific meaning in English and it refers to a specific title. And we're not saying that that's what he literally is. We're using that as an analogy. We're using that as a metaphor to point to him. And I've heard the argument that even the word God is a metaphor and an analogy in the same way that Lord is, in that we're comparing him to these uh, lesser provincial entities, but the comparison only goes so far. We're comparing him because it's difficult to describe I am who am directly.
It's actually a really great point. And I actually never thought about it going that direction. That, instead of describing these lesser beings as sort of like degenerate or weaker versions of the greater being, what we're actually doing is taking the familiar concept of the lesser being and applying it as a pastiche, however imperfectly, to the greater being, because that's sort of the only handle we have on the situation. That's actually
Exactly, because everybody knows what a small g god is like. That's very constant across the all of Earth history and culture. So it's a reasonable comparison to make. It's a reasonable analogy to go to.
Well, and the it's also on the same thing, along the same line. In stanza 5, he says, "We know we once were gods," um,
Hmm.
and obviously, from a Christian perspective, like, okay, there's a problem here. At the same time, he does "we poor sons of Adam," referring directly to the Christian and Hebrew story of where we came from. Um, you know,
I would I would
if you
argue.
take
Because, like, on the one hand, we were never celestial beings. We were always made from the dust of the earth, but with the breath of God giving us life. But at the same time, in our original function, we were meant to be as Elohim on the earth. We were supposed to be the guardians put in place by God to run and manage this part of creation. We just sort of messed that up. And so the notion of, these lesser divine beings is also sort of analogous with the idea of the, sort of
Prelapsarian man.
animistic gods. And so you can kind of, on a conceptual level, make that link. Although, again, I don't go to Kipling for theology. I go to him for inspiration and entertainment.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where I was going. Like, if you think seriously about what we were before we made our crucial mistake, as compared to what we are now, living forever, without disease or injury. Yeah, God seems like a pretty good word for it. And so, like, yeah, that kind of well, and also, like he says, at that point, we know we once were gods. Take shame in being broken, however great the odds. And it's like, we know where we were and are supposed to be something better, because when we fail, it bothers us. Even when, like, yes, obviously you're going to fail. Obviously, in these conditions, failure is the most likely outcome, but it still, bothers us. It still eats at us. And so it is, another an interesting angle on that. Um, I have to say, this started off in an entirely different direction than I was thinking it would.
Well, in that case,
Uh-huh.
I'll try to bring it back. You notice the year. This was published 1935. That Kipling died less than a year after publication. I have to think.
So this,
I mean, at the very least, in Christianity, Nunc et in hora mortis nostrae, now and at the hour of our death, is a very common frame. Kipling died January of 1936, and this was published late 1935. So it was he was very much aware by the time he wrote this of the fact that his death was impending. He had, if I recall correctly, multiple smaller problems before the hemorrhage that ultimately killed him. So, given that, I got to think this is something he wrote because he was thinking about his own body as it was breaking down and as it was starting to fail him.
yeah,
And that adds another layer to the poem, I think.
yeah, because I primarily think about this, at least up until now, I was primarily thinking about this in terms of, like, in, moral and intellectual terms, but also, as mortal beings, as, fallen and, corrupted some in various fashions. We are, subject to injury, and we are subject to, just slowly coming apart as time goes by. I am aware I do not look it, but you know, I am past a certain age where, like, you just slowly things start appearing, and you start creaking a little bit at different points. And it's I actually, I might even find that and put that up if I can find that quickly. I might even put that up on. I made a meme about this once. But yeah, mortality, dying doesn't happen all at once. You know, I I don't feel like I quite have the phrasing right, but like I might, if I can get things together, I might someday write a poem starting from this, or using this as the seed. I don't know whether it'd be the first line, but like, uh, you know, as an act of mercy on us, God, to since God knew we had to die, he let us get used to it by dying a little piece at a time. Um, but
You want to come to my house and like pet the dog for a minute, dude?
this is just, both of you are at least a little younger than me, so let it catch up. You'll see what I'm talking about.
We're catching up. Don't worry about it.
Jeez, I don't know what to tell you. On the one hand, I can feel things that are like, yeah, that didn't used to be a thing. But on the other hand, I also couldn't used to like, deadlift a washing machine. So kind of like on the one hand, probably like more physically powerful than I've ever been. On the other hand, my knees. they just keep reporting.
It is also interesting to me, like this poem is like, wasn't it actually? I don't think the term even existed at the time, but like, if talking about it in today's terms, it feels just a little bit like autistic. In his like primary complaint is like, why don't human beings have a user's manual?
Yeah, it's like, it's not fair. Everything else we can measure what's going to happen. We can calculate the effect. We can see the problem coming. And then here we're like, I'm going to do something cool. And then it's like, Thunderbolt. But honestly, I like this. This is like a sort of, it's like it spends a lot of time getting around to the indomitable human spirit. But like, it's, like, I think that's what's wonderful about it. It talks about all the ways we get broken without realizing it, and that unlike a stone, unlike an I-beam, unlike a cable or a rope, we know we've broken and we feel like it's our fault. But even because of that, we can actually come back from it. A broken stone is a broken stone. A bent beam
it's not going to recover.
Yeah, shattered glass is shattered. But we can be shattered, bent, and broken, cut into a million pieces, and we can pull back together and become greater than we were before. And that is what is amazing about us. The automaton can't do that. The tree. Well, actually, to an extent, trees can do that. Bad analogy, but anyway.
But the girder's not going to come back by itself.
The engineered component doesn't heal. It doesn't regenerate. It just winds down and is done. The bearing on my truck, ground down and fused and shut down the whole truck. It didn't, become a better bearing. And so, that's what's great about who we are and who we can be if we're willing to, bear up under that, take the losses, and, move forward still. I like it. I loved this poem, reading it. And so I was glad that Harry let me read it tonight, because I wanted to put voice to it.
Well, and then, if you look at stanza 4, he's like, we hold all earth to plunder, all time and space as well. Which it's kind of funny because at the same time, like, this was, this was, early 20th century, and we didn't have the physical capabilities we later would have, but we also had a sense of like optimism and like basically the power of mankind that is at the very least somewhat diminished today. Um, there was there was a peak to that, but at some that optimism, that feeling of like to use the term for a particular genre of fiction, humanity F yeah. Like I feel like there was a peak to that. If I had to guess, sometime in the 90s, that kind of peaked, and it's been sloping off since then. Um, it seems like there's a lot more, cynicism and a lot more like, oh, well, we're never going to do those kind of things. It seems to be rather more of the attitude these days. Even though in some ways we do have more physical capabilities, um, although, we also can't put people on the moon at the moment, which also makes some people question whether we in fact did. Um, I am agnostic on that particular question. But
I mean, reading this, it's understandable why people would want to believe that we didn't, because the alternative is that we did and we lost it, and that we've gone downhill. I mean, it's the same thing with the ancient Egyptians couldn't have built the pyramids because we couldn't have built the pyramids with that level of technology. It's the same, that the impulse, and I say this even regardless of any of the actual facts on the ground or facts on the space, I guess, but even regardless of that, the reason why you would start looking for reasons to think it wasn't true is because the alternative is not that pleasant a thought. Let's face it. It's not that fun to think that they were able to do it with practically stone knives and bear skins by comparison to what we have now.
well, and I've actually heard one person, because that is a pretty common argument against it. It's like, they could do this then, but we can't do it now. We lost the technology. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I have heard at least one person, argue. Well, I have heard at least one person say, a part of that people aren't taking into account, is like very skilled and careful craftsmanship, just in terms of like drilling, like drilling out holes for like the various parts to fit together, and like the care and the level of detail that went into that, and people aren't we don't have people trained to that kind of thing anymore, although that does seem like a thing robotics would do better anyway, so now that doesn't make sense.
It's not that we lost the ability, it's that we lost the will. We could 100% get there. It's just that now there are some tricks and trades, like to actually land and get back up. We would have to do a lot of scientific work and figure out how to rebuild something that would collapse under its own weight on Earth, but is just strong enough to support itself at 1/6 Earth gravity, because that's the kind of engineering you have to do. But it's will. We could absolutely do it again. We could. We just don't want to.
And compare our situation, in which we're talking about the possibly greatest achievement of humanity's physical engineering being the moon landing in 1969 through 1972. Compare that to Kipling, where he would have grown up before the automobile with just horse and carriage, and the most advanced thing was trains and telegraphs. And by the time he was writing this in 1935, he'd seen planes go from the little flimsy Wright Brothers style stuff made out of what looks like cardboard, two practically modern bombers, not quite jets, but the kind of heavy stuff that they were developing prior to World War II. Compared to that level of advancement would feel remarkable given where he started from. It makes perfect sense to me that he would look at that and say, we hold all earth to plunder, all time and space as well, to wonder still to wonder at each new miracle.
Yeah, and exactly. Like one of the most impactful photos I've ever seen was a living Civil War veteran standing next to an F-100 fighter jet.
Ooh.
Like,
wow.
This looked like he was going to walk out of frame and into the grave. But like he was there for the Civil War, fought in it, and is now standing next to a supersonic fighter jet. I was like, bruh.
Yeah. It's hard to fathom. It really is. The only equivalent we have right now in terms of something that flashy would be the advance of computer science. It's harder to take pictures next to next to the internet, but that's the only thing that we can really use as a comparison to what they would have been feeling looking at the advances of physical science.
Well, honestly, if you want to think about a physical engineering thing going on, logistics. The logistics that we have at our fingertips today are something that spy novels were written about 40 years ago, right? In the 80s, the thought that you could get on a little handheld device and tap up, hey, I need this, and somebody a world away would immediately start fulfilling that delivery, that's James Bond crap. The fact that I can summon, the fact that I can summon potato chips from half a world away and they'll be here in a couple of days, and I never have to leave my couch. I can just literally send little magic pixie impulses into the ether. And like I said, in a couple of days, my spicy Doritos show up. That's magic. That's amazing.
I do remember watching a video in which some people are talking. One person comments that he finally got the mute button on his phone's texting to work again. And someone else says, imagine trying to explain that to a caveman. And the attempt at explaining the mute button on a phone to a caveman was, okay, I have this magic box, and my friend has this magic box, and my friend says words into the magic box, and the box turns those words into air, and it goes through the air to my magic box and back into words, which I ignore. And it puts it in perspective. What we do take for granted in terms of electronics.
Oh, so I found something to return to momentarily to an earlier part of the conversation. I think I can get this to show up on the screen. Let me see if I can put this over here. Oh, wait. Arg. One moment. Oh, crud.
I think next time I'm going to go ahead. Next time we do a conversation, I'm going to go ahead and go avatar mode because I remember to have a picture that I just want people to stare at.
I like this plan. I like it so much I'm doing it already.
Yeah, I got
anyway, but what was
one time I've ever been second time I've ever been badly hooked while fishing. And I've just got a picture of the crankbait buried to the turn of the hook in the back of my thumb, and I'm just like,
this is gonna get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just like, okay. Okay.
I'm not 100% sure if this shows up on the.
Oh yeah, that showed up.
Do you guys see that?
We see it. I don't think the video is going to see it.
Here, wait. Let me see if I can. I know I can make that happen. It's just gonna take a second. But yeah, this was talking about aging and watching things slowly stop working. Oh wow. It's share screen. That was it. And I got to remember to turn it off this time.
Don't worry, we can cut out the past 5 minutes from the video.
as this one podcast I've been listening to lately that's just kind of starting refers to, it's like, let's not have any more on-air production meetings. Could we not do those, please? Uh, I don't know if we're even sophisticated enough to call it that, but yes. Let's see. Where was? Now let me find my copy of the where I have the poem up here again. Where is it? I didn't close it. There it is. But yeah, it also says, like, they presently overtake us with loads we cannot bear, too merciless to bear, and it's like, it does seem like, at some point everyone faces some kind of crisis that's like, what am I supposed to do with this? How how am I supposed to get through this? What like the kind of cliche is that God doesn't put anything in your life that you aren't able to deal with, but it's like, doesn't always feel like that. Sometimes that feels a little too easy, an answer, and so it's that is definitely a I think that's a pretty common experience. Like, everyone comes to those moments where it's like, God, what am I doing here? Like, what is there a plan? Because if there's a plan, I don't see a way around or through this. This just kind of looks like the end.
There is something, I mean, to continue the metaphor of the poem itself, there's something called strain hardening, in which you have a material and you deform it back, and it is now stronger than it was before. But strain hardening only works when you undergo what's called plastic deformation. And plastic deformation means you're being damaged. By you, I mean the material. Elastic deformation, if something is elastic, you move it and then you let go and it goes right back to where it was. Nothing has actually changed within the material. Plastic deformation goes further, though. You push it past that critical point at which it starts yielding. And yet, even though it's been damaged, you damage it and then you damage it back, and now it's stronger than it was. And I don't know, this was known in the 30s, very well known, basically throughout the history of metallurgy. I don't know if Kipling knew about it, but I think you could easily read that into this particular poem. I think it's perfectly believable that that's something like what he was writing about, and then maybe he couldn't find a rhyme for strain hardening or something.
I mean, the word hardening sounds like the name of a Frost poem.
Does it?
I know it's not one. I'm just saying it sounds like it would be.
Yeah. I don't know. Frost poems.
Yeah, no, work hardening is an interesting one because, like, also the ways you have to address it are different depending on the material. Like the process that quenches steel anneals silver.
Right.
It makes it
right, and if you try to work harden something that's brittle instead of ductile, it's just going to snap.
That's right. And so and it's interesting because all the disparate materials, like, there's really no way to work harden stone; it just breaks. But you can do it to things like metals. You can even do it to plastic to an extent. And then, wood doesn't really care. It's pretty much just going to break.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes something ductile instead of brittle. And sometimes it happens and it's actually not good. Like when you're trying to drill into something and you find the area that you're drilling into suddenly starts getting harder and tougher. And you didn't want that. You wanted a hole.
Yeah.
It's
cut slowly sometimes.
What'd you say?
You got to cut slowly sometimes.
Yep. Yep.
That's a whole different conversation. How you got to treat different things differently. Know what you're dealing with and get at it in the appropriate way.
Which is why we're grateful for all these textbooks. One of which, incidentally, what'd you say?
That we don't have for people.
One of the biggest metallurgy textbooks of all things. It was a medieval text written in Latin, translated by Herbert Hoover. And I had no idea. I was reading about this. The book is called De Re Metallica. It was written, I think, 1500s. Don't quote me on that, but sometime around that medieval era. And I knew Hoover was a mining engineer, but reading it after the Wikipedia article, after going through the basic outline of what it talks about, mentions that it was first English translation was published by Herbert Hoover, a mining engineer, and then in parentheses, and later President of the United States. It was just very funny note. So they definitely knew a lot of this stuff quite a long time ago, because this is important. If you're trying to do anything in the physical world, you need to know how that material is going to behave. Is it going to get harder? Is it going to snap? That's you got to figure that out before you build it.
So one thing I had intended to bring up earlier that we and we kind of moved on. We're talking about, like, progress of science and, like, all time and space, beneath our hands. Kipling actually wrote at least one science fiction story. I have in a collection here. I don't know if I'd be able to find it right now. Which is it's a libertarian science fiction story, basically. And it's kind of funny because, well,
it was
it's
with
actually
with the Night Mail, correct?
Night Mail. I don't
So,
remember.
He wrote
the group
with the Night Mail. It's about the Aerial Board of Control, or the ABC, which uses airship traffic and controls basically all communication, or at least all physical mail from all over the world. And in one night, you can send mail, or anything really, from one side of the world to the other. And it's been noted by people smarter than me that the Aerial Board of Control, this corporation that's more powerful than any country that controls global communication, it's called the ABC. And our closest equivalent, Google, its parent company is called Alphabet.
Yeah.
And Kipling was pretty smart with that.
Is that the? I don't remember the title because it's been a long time since I read this. I might be able to find it in a minute if. Go ahead.
I'm kind of sad that missile mail quit being a thing, just because it sounds hilarious.
I know.
No, what you're talking about earlier, though, is like, if you're going to work with this material, you need to know what it's doing. In the Bible, they actually, like, the ability to craft and work with materials is described as a kind of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Like God-given wisdom. Like the guy who made most of the workings for the tabernacle was described as, being gifted with God, or gifted by God with wisdom to do the things he did, to make and to craft and to create with all these disparate materials. It's like, essentially, it's like this guy was a genius. And so,
Yeah.
it's a sort of wisdom that we don't really, like, attribute anymore. Like, everybody thinks that wisdom's supposed to be an intellectual thing, when there's a wisdom of the hands that comes from the experience of doing things. And honestly, before I got into, like, technical and, like, just sort of physical fixing of things, I didn't understand that as well. But once I started, like, fixing stuff for a living, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And there's a lot of, as here, so there kind of thing, where you're like, oh, yeah, this actually translates really well. There's like a basic skill set to do essentially any of these technical things, that once you have it in one field, you can start to transfer it to some facets of other fields. And by the time you've got 3 or 4 fields, you probably know 80% of everything.
Well, and there's that actually reminds me of something I had said a while ago, and someone referred to this. I had posted this in an online forum, and someone had referred to it as Kaczynski posting. I was like, thanks.
You're like,
Um,
a little conflicted at that comparison.
but
You know, terrorists,
like I said,
mad profit.
it's the you know, a little bit of the same thing he says here. Like our the human soul is a living thing. And as a living thing, it works a lot more like a plant growing than like a computer or a car. Um, but the way we tend to think most of the time, or a lot of the time, is by analogies. We tend to think of this thing is like this thing. And we try and work things out using those analogies. And one problem that comes out of this for us today is that as we are increasingly working not with nature, not with plants, animals, or even building physical things, as we're increasingly working with ideas and abstractions or very machines like computers, the metaphors we're drawing from to understand ourselves are being pulled out of machines, are being pulled out of computers, and we are losing a significant ability to understand ourselves because we're comparing ourselves to things that are much more unlike us. And anyway,
And I
think
I've mentioned this to Zachlog before, but something about modern machine learning is basically the fundamental axiom of modern machine learning is that the patterns in the universe that can be understood by humans is a very, very, very tiny subset of the patterns out there, period. For decades, the whole idea of machine learning was trying to make an expert system that looks at the universe and reduces the universe to understandable patterns, like the textbooks that Kipling mentions here, like the explicit tables, like having explicit rules that a human being can look at and understand. But modern AI, ever since 2012, where there was this huge revolution in AI, and basically every pre-2012 method has now gone extinct. Modern AI is all built on the assumption that human beings can't understand the patterns that are going on, and that the only thing we can do is we can try to train some kind of network to emulate the pattern. But the network doesn't understand it either. The network just does it. And on one hand, it's a disturbing axiom. Certainly Thomas Aquinas talks a lot about the difference between astrology and astronomy, and his difference was that astronomy is looking for cause and effect. It's looking to predict the things of the sky using the information of the sky. He talks about augury, the foretelling of the future with birds, and he mentions that if you're looking for something that a bird might conceivably notice, like the foreshock of an earthquake or an enemy troop movement marching through at night, and the birds go silent, he said that sort of thing is perfectly licit. It's perfectly fine. That's not divination. That's not wrong at all, because you're looking for cause and effect. You're looking for understanding, and that understanding is what God gave us the gift of reason for. And he compared that with, if you're trying to foretell the future with things that are totally unrelated, like seeing the future of a battle with the entrails of a goat, that is illicit because you're not looking for cause and effect. And when you throw out cause and effect, that's where you allow dark forces to take control over you, because you're getting an input without having any idea where the input's coming from. And it really concerns me that modern AI is not just doing that, but it's built on an axiom of doing that. And it disturbs me even more that the axiom, as far as I can tell, is true. There are a lot of patterns that you just could not write down in any metric that a human being could understand.
Like what you were saying, like right at the beginning when you started this whole train of thought, I was like, yeah, I mean, essentially, like this whole idea of like, you know, if you can understand the patterns that other people can't, like if you have that sort of high level deal, you're essentially a wizard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you have access to things that normal men do not. And then we kind of, you know, you ended up there that we're like on the same page with this. Like it's unnatural.
Yeah. We're on exactly the same page.
Given to accept.
Well, and
there are things that
we're another thing
or be aware of at all, and that's fine.
Well, and another thing on a less like disturbing is this going to destroy us all kind of note. You know, even within human capacity, there are, you know, more and less intelligent people, and more like I've heard, you know, at least one person talk about like you know, the difference he's observed between intelligent people and very intelligent people above a certain level. And he says like there's at a certain point there's a qualitative difference in the way people see things, and at a certain point of IQ, like you're not seeing a thing, you're seeing an entire pattern of things without even trying. And to someone who can't make those connections in the same way, like when you try to explain it, they like, you know, again, to use the same, they look at you like you're a wizard, because it's like, what, how did you possibly get there? And you're like,
how would you feel
how
if you
do you
had
not like
I mean, there's a reason the word wizard comes from the word wise. At a certain point where the distinction is not that obvious to draw. That's why Thomas Aquinas had to spend like 50 pages talking about what the difference was.
Well, and oh, by the way, I did find that story I was talking about. It's in this collection right here. I'm sure it's in many other places, especially since by now it's probably public domain. It's as easy as ABC. So it is with that company you had mentioned. Did he do more than one story with them?
Yep, he did too.
Oh, okay.
With the Night Mail was the first. Easy as ABC was the second. But they're the same universe.
And it is a very libertarian kind of ethos, like, because if I recall correctly, you know, there's no governments or even really nations, and like what horrifies the one thing they strive to avoid above all is a bunch of people like joining together in some kind of ideological cause, and they're like, look, we need to not have that happen, please.
Well, to be fair, he wrote With the Night Mail in 1905. With the Night Mail didn't have any of that. That was just a pure speculation. Oh, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we had worldwide aerial ships delivering mail all the time? Easy as ABC, if I recall correctly, was published after the start of World War I. And I can see where Kipling, I don't know if it was before or after Kipling lost his son, but I can see where Kipling would be a bit concerned about that sort of thing by then.
Well, yeah, and actually, this is, you know, something to get back to the poem, as is the phrase here. That we in this poem, he's like, as we grow in power, as we grow in capability, we also grow in the capability to damage ourselves. If we don't know what we're doing, and like, you know, like the poem says, you know, these in the middle of
Till in the mid illusion of godhood neath our hand falls multiple
until in the mid
confusion.
illusion of Godhead neath our hand. Yeah, like we feel like, well, we're the top of the heap. We can do anything we want. We can do anything we set our minds to, and then everything kind of falls apart, which oddly is also in somewhat of a contradiction, is also one of the oldest stories of mankind, because that's basically the Tower of Babel. Like, we're all, if we all join together and we all set our minds to one thing, we can do this great thing. And God looks at us and is like, no, you're not going to. No, you're not going to, and I'm going to make sure that this is not a thing that can even potentially happen.
I don't know if you heard, but there is an effort to make a reconstruction of the Tower of Babel now. It's somewhere in the Midwest. I forget exactly where, but I feel it's done by some it's done like a Christian theme park, I think, in Kentucky. And you would think that the lesson of the Tower of Babel in the Bible is don't do this, but here we are. So eventually our descendants are going to be stuck speaking, as a commenter pointed out, when our descendants ask why they've stuck speaking 4,900 fractal hyperlanguages, we're going to have a really embarrassing explanation for them.
Well, modern tech startup. Hey guys, we finally managed to create the torment nexus from the beloved classic. Do not create the torment nexus.
Yep. Yeah, that's basically what they're doing here. Hopefully, we'll see what happens to the full-scale replica.
Even at the not physical, recreating a tower, recreating an actual tower kind of thing, it does seem like a lot of people in high places do have that same vision of humanity all joined together as one, and we're going to get rid of this whole idea of nations and borders and loyalty to your particular group. We're all just going to be one humanity. And it's like, and I forget where, I remember seeing someone point out there's this classical there's this classical painting of the Tower of Babel, and they show some UN building or something like that, and they're very clearly modeling this after that, and it is more or less a direct challenge to God, and A, these are very bad people, and B, this is not going to go the way they think it is.
It should be noted that the Bible itself has an answer to Babel, and that being Pentecost, where everyone is speaking different languages and can understand what St. Peter is saying anyway. It's the reunification of language after the division of language in the Tower of Babel.
Yep, and that's one of the
and
it's also
sorry, go ahead.
It's also after God has gone down, he's gone down into creation and basically reclaimed the scattered authority. It's like, no, I am now, it's like I'm taking the nations back. These are going to be mine again. I will send my servants to preach to your people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So we are about at an hour here. So to go to my usual closing question, Nate, do you have any last thoughts about this poem that you wanted to talk about here?
Yes. Gonna say something I said in basic training to the troop that I was in, my flight, which is that there are various materials that go into making steel, but all of them are going to get melted. All of them are going to be transformed, and all of them are going to become something stronger. But again, they're going to be heated up. They're going to be in a really, really terrible place for a while. And sadly, some of those things will be converted into slag and discarded, but the rest of it's going to be steel, and it's going to go on to be, do great things, to build, to shape, to support. And so you have to decide when you find yourself in that crucible, are you going to just bubble up, grab the closest piece of trash and become slag, or are you going to hew to the iron and become steel? And so every day you're going to get a little heat. What are you going to do with it? I would suggest become better, become steel.
Yeah, and it's and that's one thing a little bit like in C.S. Lewis's book, The Problem of Pain. And, one of the reasons we experience suffering is because God is trying to remake us. And, if you read the Bible and pay attention, it does appear there are things that don't really fit that sometimes you're going to have pain that isn't, necessarily for that purpose. But that is one of them. And so, like, when you're going through that, part of it is, seeking God and trying to fit and trying to learn something and trying to come out stronger. Harry, go ahead.
The wood is hewn, the marble is struck. Said the steel is heated and beaten. But that's said, it ain't fun. It takes things from you, but it's the only way to find your purpose.
And Harry, how about you? Any last thoughts on this one tonight?
Nate stole my thunder. I was going to say about how I discovered this poem because it was the punchline to a knock-knock joke in a totally different book. But now that feels a bit underwhelming. I could. I mean, if I wanted to.
I want to hear
What'd you say?
I want to hear the knock-knock joke.
Oh, this was in Unsong. This was when Uriel was trying to comfort Sohu, and his knowledge of human beings is still very, very limited. But he understood that, well, knock-knock jokes are supposed to cheer people up, and so surely that's an appropriate thing to do given a enormous tragedy. So he finally insisted, knock, knock. And Sohu, through tears, asked him, who's there? A spider. A spider who? A spider being broken, or because of being broken, rise up and build anew. And I quite liked that. It was a good moment in the book. It got me to look up the poem. I appreciated it being there.
Okay. I actually feel like I could go on for quite a while, but there are other things that call my attention here. Sadly, this is not, well, not sadly. I am glad this is not my sole duty. But as relates to my YouTube channel, sadly, this is not my sole duty. And so I think we're going to close off tonight. Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Nate, for joining us tonight. Everyone watching, thank you. I hope you found this interesting, and God be with you.
Also with you.